Hello, I'm here again to present another lesson to you guys, and by this time, our topic is literature in the teaching of language skills. Literature can be a very effective means of developing the language skills of our pupils, specifically this listening, reading, writing, and speaking. So let's see in this presentation how can we use this literature and what um, activities or strategies can we adopt or can we use in developing those macro skills of our students. Let's talk first about literature and reading. If you're teaching a literature or a literary piece to your students, and if you wanted to enhance their reading skills, you have to remember these three levels. So we have first the literal level. What do we often ask here in the literal level? Definitely, we ask about the facts of the story. So where did the story happen? What time, if the time was indicated, the atmosphere of the story, who are the characters in the story, who are the protagonists, antagonists in the story, what happened in the beginning of the story, the rising action, falling action, including the ending. Okay, so if these students can understand these questions or can answer these questions, that means that they understood the story literally. Okay, so that's the first thing to do. As teachers, you have to check if your students understood the story in literal level, because you cannot go deeper. You cannot let them interpret and analyze a certain text if they cannot if they did not understand the story very well. Okay, after literal level, you can proceed to inferential level. So here they can now start making speculations or interpretations in the setting, characters, theme, and even the point of view. So you can ask about the symbolism of the objects or the characters in the story, and you can ask them the reasons behind their actions. You can let them speculate about the theme of the story, and so on and so forth. So that's the inferential level. Okay, then after that, we can now proceed to personal or evaluative level. So this stimulates students to think imaginatively about the work. In this time, you can now ask your students to evaluate the work. So for example, do you like the ending of the story? If you don't like, or if you don't really like the ending of the story, how will you make an ending of that, right? So you can let them make an ending of the story, and that's already integrated, right? You can integrate that already into writing. So see, you are using literature in developing the reading skills of the students. At the same time, if you let them write an ending of the story, then you integrate now the writing skills, because these skills, these macro skills, are not taught in isolation. Okay, they are always integrated with one another. Okay, or you can ask them to evaluate an action of the character. Okay, or you can ask them, if you are the main character in the story, what would you do? Okay, so that will help them stimulate their imagination, and of course will provoke their problem solving abilities. Of course, if you let them be in the shoe of the one of the characters in the story, and definitely they will be facing um, conflict in the story. What possible solutions could they make? What actions will they be doing if they are the character? Okay, so that's it, the personal and evaluative level. Now it depends on the strategy of the teacher. How will he or she is going to present this one? Okay, because it can be individual, but it could also be a collaborative work. So for example, if they understood already the story in the literal level, then the teacher can group the students or pair the students so they can exchange work with exchange ideas regarding their own interpretation of the story, right? And they can also share their personal views, their evaluation of the story itself. So it depends on the creativity as well of the teacher. Depends on you. Okay, so that's read literature and reading. Now let's talk about literature and writing. Literature can be a powerful and motivating source of writing, both as a model and subject matter. So what does it mean, model and subject matter? So as a model, you can use controlled writing. All right. So what does it mean? You can. This is actually very effective to beginning learners. Okay. So you can ask them to rewrite certain scenarios in the story or certain sentences in the story and let them analyze the grammatical structure of those sentences. So you are now integrating grammar in your teaching, okay? Or probably you can ask them to have a newscast of the story, right? They can write newscast, live newscast out of the text you have taught to them. So it can also be, right? It could be a model, and then you can also have the guided writing. So this is very important, specifically if you wanted them to master the story in the literal level. Okay, so how do you do this? You can ask them questions. Okay, you can ask them series of questions in which if the students or pupils answer those questions, they can now summarize the story. Okay, or you can give them sentences or yeah, send a prompt, and then they're going to continue the sentence or paragraph. In which, if they will be able to do that, they can already sum up the story. Okay, so this is more of the mastery of the story. You can use also this one, the guided writing. You just have to provide worksheets to your pupils or students, and then reproduct or you're reproducing the model. You can let them paraphrase, summarize, and adopt. So paraphrase, how do you do that? So for example, in the story, it is told in through dialogue, right? So with this, you can ask the students um, to write a narrative of the dialogue. It could also be or vice versa, right? A narrative, out of the narrative, you let your students write um, um, out of narrative, you let them write a dialogue. It could also be done by the students, right? Or you let them write, if the story was told in third person point of view, you can ask your students to write or rewrite the story or paraphrase the story using the first person point of view, right? So there are a lot of things that you can give to your students in order for them to develop the writing skills. Now, for composition teachers, actually it's very hard for them to choose a subject matter, okay? However, if you use literature, there could be a wide range of subject matter. The topic could be a subject matter, the theme could be a subject matter, the characters, symbolism, and so on and so forth. So there are a lot of subject matters that they can get. So that's the second one that we'll be talking here, okay? As a subject matter, so students make inferences, formulate their own ideas, and look closely at a text for evidence to support generalization. So you can provide questions to them. So see, the role of the teacher here is a guide. Okay, you guide them. How? You must have to have good questioning skills. Okay, so your questions will help them make inferences or formulate ideas. Okay, so your questions must be under higher order thinking skills. All right, so you can let them analyze, evaluate, create, what else? Synthesize, and so on and so forth, right? Okay, and you also have to tell your students whenever they make inferences or interpretation in the text, whether it is written or in oral, they have to always look for evidences in the text itself. Okay, it's not just a matter of saying your interpretation because that's your own point of view, because there must be an evidence of that. So what are the supporting, what would support your interpretation, what would support your inferences, so you can get from the text itself to support your generalizations, interpretations, speculations, so on and so forth. There are mainly two kinds of writing based on literature as a subject matter. So we have writing on or about literature and writing out of literature. Writing on or about literature. So you can give this one traditional assignments, okay? Written responses to questions, paragraph writing, in-class essays, and take-home compositions. Now, this is very important, and this is very helpful if you will be able to do this correctly, okay? Because I know this is my observation as a literature teacher, okay? If you ask your students to read a text, for example, a short story or a poem, 2 days before, okay, so that they can prepare with the discussions. Now, during your discussion, when the day comes, only few of the students have read the story. And sometimes what happens is they even forgot their copy. Okay, that happens inside the classroom. So you can use this on or writing on or about literature. So you can give them sets of questions. If this is effective in the higher grade levels, you can give them already sets of questions, and then you give them the copy. Okay, so these could be guide questions in understanding well the story and interpreting the story, so that during the discussion students can share a lot because they've already learned, they've already read and interpreted the story, right? So therefore the discussion is very active. Okay, you can also in lower grades, you can also discuss first of all the theme of the story. Okay, for example, you give them the story, that will be the topic by next meeting, but you will not discuss yet today, right? What you will be discussing or what we will be telling to them is about the theme of the story. So you can explore about the theme of the story, especially if the story is very nice, right? Because if they know the theme of the story, that will help them become excited, okay, in learning the story or the piece that you gave to them. So in turn, the students or pupils will then read the story in their home. Okay, they will have advanced reading already. Okay, however, writing on or about literature is not only done before teaching the literature itself, the text itself. You can also use that one during the study of literature, during the discussion, and you can also you can also let them write or use this one right after the discussion. It depends again on your creativity as a teacher. Got it? Okay. So writing out of literature. Writing out of literature means making use of literary work as a springboard for composition. So creative assignments developed around plot, character, setting, and theme. So there is still, you're writing a composition, but there is still the connection of the text that you have read. Okay, so it could be based from the plot, from the characters, setting, themes, or figurative languages that were used in the text or literary piece. So you can use or you can add you can use these following activities adding to the work, right? You can let them, for example, you can let them add a scene in the story, right? So if you will be the author and if you will be rewriting the story, what additional scene will you be adding in this story? Okay, that's composition, right? So making that will stimulate as well their creativity. Changing the work, you can ask them to change to change the ending of the story. If they're not satisfied with the ending, they can, for example, if it's a happy ending and they don't want happy ending, then they can change it. Okay, or if the story was told in a traditional manner, okay, or at the traditional plot, then they could use literary devices in order to retell the story in different ways. For example, they can use in media res, so they can start with the middle, and then beginning, and then the ending, right? They can now make use of flashback and foreshadowing. So again, creativity of the students will be stimulated here. And drama inspired writing, okay, they can write script of that of the text they have read. Okay, they can always do that. And a letter addressed to another character, right? For example, you are one of the characters in the story, right? What would you tell to the other character? Okay, this is very effective, especially for higher level, especially if the story is very interesting. If it's about love and so on and so forth. If it's in the lower grades, probably the most effective stories are stories which theme are focused on the love of parents, to teachers, and then the pets, and so on and so on. So they could also do that one, a letter addressed to another character or persona if you what you have studied is a poetry. Okay, so that's literature and writing. Now we'll talk about speaking and listening. So this is equally important, of course, in equally important as reading and writing, speaking and listening, right? So you can do this always. I mean, you can also do this inside your classroom. Okay, in presenting short stories or presenting a poem inside your classroom, you can use oral reading. You can in lower level, or you can do this first. Okay, you read. If it is a poem, you read it first. Okay, of course you have to model the correct pronunciation, diction, and so on and so forth, so that your students will imitate it. Okay, again, if you read that, they will listen. All right, after listening, they will also read the poem themselves. Okay, so listening and speaking. Okay, what is the advantage of reading that one? Okay, if students read aloud the text, whether it's a poem or short story, they can assess and monitor their pronunciation. So they could also enhance their pronunciation, okay, the diction, and so on and so forth, right? So that's the power of oral reading. But of course, there are a lot of ways to make it more interesting to the students. Again, it's a matter of the creativity of the teacher. Okay, drama. Okay, you can let them dramatize the story. Okay, if it is a short story, if there are two or more personae in the poem, then you can let them write the script of the poem and then dramatize it. Okay, so in dramatizing it, if they dramatize a certain scene or a certain poem, the more that they appreciate it, the more that they can feel, okay, the emotion in this story, and the more they learn, okay, about the text you have studied. So dramatization could be could be dramatization, like what I've said, and role playing or improvisation, right? So again, in acting out, okay, the scenes in this story, definitely they would enhance their speaking and listening skills, right? So these are, again, as you can see, okay, these four skills are actually integrated with one another. Again, if you will be teaching literature, or if you'll be enhancing the language skills of the students, do not isolate the skills, because these are integrated. Okay, all right, so that's it. I hope it helps you. I mean, it would help you. I mean, you understand further You understand the lesson very well. If you have questions, though, you can always drop a comment in the comment section. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Okay, that 감사합니다. Thank you and bye bye.